Are you tired of stressing out about balanced combat encounters at the TTRPG table? Well, today we're talking about why Land of Eem isn't afraid of an unfair fight, and why you shouldn't be either. Balance in combat encounters. That's what we're talking about today, and how we don't care. Huh? I said it. I said it.
Okay, yeah. Over here at Land of Eem, we don't care about balance in combat. You know why? We'll tell you why. There are a lot of reasons, but one of the biggest reasons is that balance doesn't always mean good design.
It's true. And we're not knocking anybody that's created a balanced combat system that's really tight. I mean, not at all. In the context of making a story feel like a story and having your characters engage creatively, combat doesn't need to be balanced at all.
What imbalance does often is create tension because there is a huge obstacle ahead of your players. So one thing imbalanced combat encounters does is it sort of flips the script on the players, okay? They're at a disadvantage. They've got to scramble to think of ideas. It breeds creativity when you can't just go toe-to-toe with the enemy.
And creativity is what creates memorable combat encounters. And people don't remember every critical hit and doubling their damage or anything like that. They remember the big moment where they punched the monster in the nose or they tripped it with a jump rope or something like that.
One thing that imbalanced combat does is it sort of bolsters the sense of exploration and discovery. Now, hear me out, James. I'm going to liken this to World of Warcraft, like classic World of Warcraft, where there was this really, like, the game first came out, big sense of exploration, and you kind of wander into a zone that you weren't meant for. And there was that was thrilling. Like you got to see the big scary monsters that you weren't ready for yet. And that can happen a lot when you're traveling in Land of Eem. You run across a werewolf or a dragon and you quickly realize that you're outclassed. Like, that's not a fair fight. That's not a balanced combat encounter, but it's really memorable. And what it does is it ups this sense of exploration. Like, you feel like you can encounter anything. Like, the world is limitless. Everything is not just carefully curated for you.
Right. And when you're encountering those big foes, those big monsters, dragons, liches, evil tyrants, whatever it is, big foes require big ideas. You're not going to defeat the giant foe always by just punching it into the nose. Like, think of the Lord of the Rings, and Sauron wasn't defeated in a fisticuffs battle. He was defeated by a cunning plan. And so introducing that imbalance forces players to develop cunning plans. It forces players to engage with the world a completely different way. Maybe you need to sneak out of the castle with all of these guards. You're totally outnumbered. There's no way you could possibly do it. It creates more than just that, feeling of point and click battle that can be super boring. And that's actually one of the reasons that Ben and I developed the Land of Eem, is because we were sort of tired of the slog of combat and wanted to be more creative even when we were fighting.
Yeah. And even if you're not explicitly crafting a plan to, outwit a dragon or something like that, imbalanced encounters, it can also create a situation where the players are like, wow, if we're ever going to have a chance to actually go toe to toe with that thing, we're going to have to go on more adventures, find more items, like just get better, get good, and come back and actually achieve our goals way later on.
Yeah, it's a trigger for a hero's journey. Right? You've discovered that there's this giant hairy obstacle. In this case, it's a creature or monster or adversary, whatever it is. And you can't defeat them yet. So you need to go through your hero's journey to get to the end of the road where you've grown as a character, where you've gained abilities and skills, where you've found the magic sword. And that's where the real play comes in, where everybody gets to be that hero for that final moment where they actually do take on that creature. But that doesn't mean it's still always has to come down to, trading blows. You can be creative. Victory through storytelling without stats is totally viable. Role-playing and world interaction over no number crunching. And ultimately just coming up with that clever plan that outweighs brute force.
Some of the ways that Land of Eem goes about supporting this is through its mechanics. First of all, I'll start with the conflict system. What it does is it breaks up a conflict into 4 phases. And first, we've got the parlay phase, where people who want to talk can talk to the adversary. And then after that,
Yeah, whoa. Let's not be too hasty phase.
right, we set up these outs of a conflict. So you don't always have to fight toe to toe. So if a combat is super imbalanced, yeah, you can always eject if you need to. And then lastly is the phase for combat. And so we have this set up so I can throw, like when we're playing, I can throw a dragon at the players and they can quickly figure out like, oh, this isn't going our way. I can run, I can try to talk to it, or I can think of something, creative in the moment. And it's not just they're thrust into death. You know what I mean? The other thing we try to do with Land of Eem is have narrative driven class abilities that help you achieve these things. They they get your mind churning, thinking of clever solutions to whatever's in front of you.
Right. Narrative abilities give you a mechanic where you can shape the world in Land of Eem. And for example, we brought and we brought up this example before, but in our campaign, Buddies Millions, we encountered a dragon as a random encounter. We freaked out, and I used some narrative abilities for the tycoon to not only not be eaten by the dragon, but to create a business deal with the dragon and to utilize the dragon's hoard as an investment for my gumball empire. And only Land of Eem does that sound right. But
But the cool thing about that is there's still this threat in that you're pushing this threat back for a little bit, but it's still looming. You're still a delayed threat of this dragon in your life.
I now have this business partner that I need to appease. And as I'm traveling throughout the world is changing, and how are things going? And it adds tension and an overwhelming, I shouldn't say overwhelming, but a sense of dread that it may not work out and that I will have to face this dragon again and be darn clever.
Right.
But ultimately, that is something that I find exciting when I'm playing, because there's nothing better than having the odds stacked against you as a player. That's how you get to roleplay being a hero. The odds are stacked against you. And that creates storytelling gold.
What my mind goes back to is one of our, I think it was our first campaign, Riley and Galen, who it was the first time you guys encountered a Felmog Knight, the Hammer. And you guys were shocked by how powerful this guy was. And he just handed you your butt. But that created this mystique around Felmog Knights.
Yes.
And he was a recurring villain, basically.
Yep.
I don't recall if you ever went toe to toe with him, but I know that you went back to the Stone, which was the fort of the Felmog Outriders, and you definitely interacted with him and caused shenanigans later on. So created this whole piece of the campaign.
Right. Mystique is a good word for it. It created this sense that both George and I felt that we need to be not only tread lightly, but be very clever and not to necessarily get in direct combat with a Felmog Knight, because I wasn't suited for it. George was more suited for it, but we were young pups back then, we were cockeyed optimists.
So let's get into GM tips of how to actually, in any game, not just Land of Eem, how can you actually approach games this way, not have to prepare so much, create all of these intricate combat encounters, I don't even understand CR, challenge rating. And I know a lot of people don't either. It's just this math side of D&D that I'm not going to even engage with. And so we didn't even want to try to do that with Land of Eem.
Yeah.
So the first step is that you just kind of need to let go of the idea that there are fair fights. We don't need to make everything fair. Just throw things at the wall and see what happens.
See how players interact with the situation. A Felmog Knight's really, really tough, but a Felmog Knight with hot soup in their eyes, not so tough anymore, right? And they're blind. It's it's about leveling the playing field by being creative. Set a trap. There's a lot of ways that you can creatively balance an encounter. Maybe you, instead of shooting your arrow right into its target in front of you, maybe you shoot at the chandelier that's hanging above and smash the chandelier into the adversary. There's just so many ways that you can make the fights be just as spectacular and amazing, or more so, by utilizing the creative element, not just trading blows.
It does take some buy-in from the players. They got to know that this is the style of play that you guys are going to go for, because you can get stuck in just the common expectations of, all right, we're roll initiative. We're in combat now. We're locked in this blow.
Turn-based cycle, and I got to check my defense and my attack rating. Yeah, it's easy to fall into that unless you're looking at your attacks. And I definitely have been there when I was young and like learning tabletop role-playing games.
Yeah, it's a common way to play. GM needs to think about from the adversary's perspective. What do they actually want? Are they actually going to chase the PCs like really far if they run away? Or are they going to be satisfied if they just like get the PCs out of their area? They scare them off.
Yeah, do they want to kill them at all? Maybe they just want to humiliate them or threaten them or take them prisoner or barter them for goods or whatever it is. Eat them.
Yeah, it doesn't always have to be just exactly. Not everyone kills and eats immediately.
Yeah.
Incapacitate and eat later.
Right.
It's like
tenderize the meat. Oh yeah. The Wampa situation. Emergent play at its best.
Emergent meals. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Another, and one way that GMs can encourage this is obviously you set the stage that this is the type of gameplay that may unfold. So the players know they can be creative and they're encouraged to. But also when you're actually in the setting, you can use tools like location aspects, like what's around the room, to give players tools that they could utilize to potentially get the upper hand or triumph or be creative with, not just relying on the numbers.
Yeah, and this is something that we ourselves need to remember more often because it always adds more to the conflicts. Just, when they're in the thick of the game, sometimes you forget, but every single time that we do add it, it is
always has an effect.
Yeah, it always adds an awesome element to it.
Right. And then we talked a little bit about the hero's journey and how the odds are stacked against you. And if you're going to try to play a game where everybody gets to be a hero, you got to know that the hero's journey isn't balanced. It has its ups and downs, its peaks and valleys. And you win some and you lose some, but you become better for it and you grow as a character. That's hard to do when you're thinking in terms of just standard TTRPG combat. Imbalancing combat and forcing the creative to the forefront is a really great tool at ultimately delivering that kind of gameplay.
Yeah, I think every single memorable thing from our campaigns comes from the first time you guys failed. You didn't succeed and you came to a conclusion
and failed in a totally different way.
You solved the problem of ridding the Garglebees from the mountains.
Yeah, no, it was, this is such a great example because in the campaign, we solved that problem, but then we fell into the abyss. So we went from into the frying pan, out of the frying pan into the fire scenario. And that it peaks and valleys, like right when we were gloriously winning, this happened. And then it solved our problem and washed us down all the way to the bottom of the Underlands. And now we're trapped there and it's a struggle. And that's super fun.
So people are often surprised when they actually crack open Land of Eem that the PCs are often outmatched. But that's the whole point because of what we're talking about. We want to create these scenarios where the players got to use their brains in addition to all the cool things that they have on their character sheet and, magic items that they find. They got to be, they got to use their ingenuity to overcome all these challenges.
Absolutely. And that's, one of the core pieces of what makes Eem and why we made the game. The magic is ultimately in that struggle. It's in the surprises. It's in the story that comes from tilting the odds and letting the players rise anyway.
Yeah, so there you have it. Imbalanced combat.
It's awesome.
Out with balance, okay? Balance is imbalance, okay? Imbalance is the new balance.
My favorite kind of shoes. So on that note, thanks for joining us for the Wizards of Eem podcast. If you're interested in checking out Land of Eem, you can visit landofelem.com. Plus, we've got our brand new Kickstarter running right now, the Dungeoneer Adventures Beginner's Game and Underlands Sandbox Setting Expansion. So if you're so inclined, please support the campaign, and we hope you have fun with the Land of Eem.
Yep, thanks for checking it out, and we'll see you next time.
Catch ya.